Good afternoon. Welcome to month 10 of the House Republican majority's chaos, dysfunction, and extremism. Let me begin by thanking President Biden for demonstrating what leadership looks like here in America and for the free world. President Biden has made clear that there is serious business that needs to be done for the American people. But in order for that to happen, we need the House of Representatives to reopen so we can meet the needs of the American people domestically and in terms of our national security interests, so that we can stand by Israel in its time of need, stand by Ukraine in its time of need, stand by our allies throughout the world, provide humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza who may be in harm's way, and reach a spending agreement so we can keep the government open, avoid a shutdown, and continue to solve problems on behalf of everyday Americans. House Democrats continue to make clear that we are willing to find a bipartisan path forward so we can reopen the House and solve problems for hard-working American taxpayers. It's time for traditional Republicans to get off the sidelines, get in the arena, realize that the chaos, dysfunction, and extremism has to end, and the only way to do it is to figure out how we can partner in a bipartisan fashion to reopen the House and govern in a reasonable, common sense way. It's time for House Republicans to embrace bipartisanship and abandon extremism once and for all. That is your only way out of the House Republican chaos and dysfunction. Embrace bipartisanship and abandon extremism. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Leader. As we know, President Biden sent up this foreign aid package. How concerned are you about moving that forward, not just because of the lack of a speaker, but also given some Republican opposition to additional funding for Ukraine? What kinds of conversations are you having now to try to shore up support so it's kind of ready to tee up whenever all this gets resolved?
Well, when the House reopens, I'm confident that the votes exist in combination between House Republicans and House Democrats to support a national security package to meet the needs of the American people and the free world. But we have to get the House reopened. Now, it's my expectation that the Senate will begin to act on President Biden's national security package sooner rather than later. But if the House is not reopened, then it will stall unnecessarily and lives will be jeopardized. This is a serious situation, which is why the chaos and the dysfunction has to come to an end. It's now my understanding that you have several extreme MAGA Republicans on the other side of the aisle who are saying they will only ever vote for Jim Jordan. And if that, in fact, is the case, it's an additional data point that there is only one way out, a bipartisan path forward to arrive at a reasonable arrangement to embrace common ground and common sense on behalf of the American people.
I take your point about the bipartisan path, but there is some school of thought that McHenry should just kind of try it out, see if he can put a resolution forward, see if the parliamentarian stops him. Do you think that that's a method that he should explore?
You know, in the aftermath of the September 11th tragedy, this mechanism was put in place for the designation of an acting Speaker pro tem, whose sole responsibility was to organize the House in the context of a Speaker election. That was done under a House Republican majority with bipartisan votes on the Democratic side of the aisle as well. And so it's clear that Acting Speaker Pro Tem McHenry's authority is simply to preside over an election for a permanent speaker. The only other alternative is for the House to act together in a bipartisan way to elevate a speaker pro tem. That doesn't have to be Patrick McHenry. There are many good men and women on the Republican side of the aisle who I believe are patriotic, they care about America, they care about our democracy, they care about the communities that they represent, who would be reasonable individuals to consider. But there's going to have to be a move on the Republican side of the aisle to make a decision to break with the extremists who are tearing the Republican conference apart. It's a mess on the other side of the aisle, and the problem is the American people are paying the price.
It goes without saying right now that the House is pretty dysfunctional. When a new speaker,
The House Republican conference is dysfunctional. The House Democratic caucus is unified.
when a new speaker is elected at some point, what is this dysfunction that you've been seeing? How does that vote for the ability to pass supplemental appropriation bills? Are you concerned about that?
Our message to our Republican colleagues is that we need to reopen the House so that we can do things like make sure there's child care funding for working families, middle-class families, and low-income families. We need to reopen the House so we can ensure that the affordable broadband connectivity program that provides access to people all across the country in urban America, rural America, suburban America, small town America, the middle of America, the heartland of America, and Appalachia has access to affordable internet service. We need to reopen the House of Representatives so that we can provide additional disaster relief to Americans all across the country in blue states, purple states, and red states whose lives have been devastated by extreme weather events. We need to reopen the House to solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers. And House Democrats continue to say we are willing to do that in a bipartisan fashion because clearly the votes do not exist in the House Republican Conference alone to elect a speaker. House Republicans rejected McCarthy. House Republicans rejected Scalise. House Republicans rejected Jordan. House Republicans have apparently rejected McHenry. This can only be done in a bipartisan fashion. And we're serious about partnering with House Republicans in a reasonable way to do the business of the American people. Go back to this side and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Would House Democrat require concessions from Congressman McHenry in order to elect him Speaker?
Yeah, we have not discussed concessions because our view is that we want a partnership in the best interest of the American people. That simply requires the House to reopen and function in a bipartisan way so that bills that we know have support from Republicans and Democrats get up or down votes on the House floor and can't be blocked by a marauding band of extremists on the hard right. That's all we want. That's a reasonable ask. Can we govern in a bipartisan way to solve problems for the American people? So it's not about the individual, it's about the interests of everyday Americans, it's about the integrity of our institution, which House Republicans have broken at this moment.
Two questions. One, have you heard from any Republicans today on this joint resolution or anything of the sort? Two, do you need a guarantee from them that they will bring the White House supplemental up for a vote before you guys support any kind of resolution like that?
Well, common sense suggests to me that if we are going to reopen the House, it should be done so that the pressing business of the American people is before us, and that would include the national security issues presented by President Biden for Congress's consideration so we can be there for Israel and its right to defend itself against Hamas's terror, for Ukraine and the courageous struggle to defeat Vladimir Putin and Russian aggression, for our allies in the Indo-Pacific, for Palestinian civilians who are in harm's way, and for other parts of the free world. It's also important that we reopen the House so that we can pass an end-of-year spending agreement that meets the needs of the American people, consistent with the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act that was passed at the end of May and negotiated by House Republicans with President Biden, with more than 300 members of the Congress supporting it in a bipartisan way. We are asking House Republicans simply to do one thing with respect to avoiding a government shutdown and funding the government by the end of the year. Stick to the agreement that you negotiated and supported as a majority at the end of May. These are common sense things. And if there's an agreement to move forward and consider these common sense pieces of legislation, then I think there's a clear bipartisan path in order to reopen the House to solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers.
Have you talked to Republicans today?
I have not.
Do you plan to talk to Republicans about a path forward, or are you waiting for them to call you?
No, there have been ongoing conversations this past weekend and throughout the week, member to member, about coming to an enlightened agreement to reopen the House, because my Republican colleagues understand that they have to find a way to end the GOP chaos, end the GOP dysfunction, end the GOP extremism, and end the House Republican civil war. It's bad for the House Republican Conference, but more importantly, it's bad for the Congress, it's bad for the country, it's bad for the communities that all of us took an oath to fiercely represent.
When you say member-to-member discussions, are you talking about within the Democratic caucus, or Democrats talking one-on-one with Republicans?
Democrats and Republicans having conversations with each other.
Does that involve leadership?
I have not had any conversations with the other side of the aisle. So a leader to talk to is going to have to emerge in order for that to occur.
At what point, if any, do you feel like you need to get involved in those conversations?
Well, the conversations that have been ongoing and in some ways have intensified throughout the week have been serious. And I've been briefed on every single one of them. And it involves different parts of the House Republican Conference, because as we can see on the House floor, there are different parts of the House Republican Conference who have rejected the extremism of Jim Jordan. And so conversations hopefully will intensify today, perhaps continue throughout the weekend, and get us to a place where we can reopen the House no later than Monday of next week. Thank you, everyone.
Possible, sir?
It's possible.
Monday?
It's possible.